That's why I need to wake up so he can tell y'all.
Yeah, well,
Because
went so nice.
he didn't. This is okay. He be having nights. We both having nights. Like when he come to my house, we just do that every time. We get in arguments.
So what? So y'all okay?
So you guys get in arguments and you put up next?
You on? I'm on. I'm on. Yeah. I mean, I already talked to her. So yeah.
And then I had the knife, but I was.
Were you guys arguing before that?
No, we was just over here fighting, and then.
So fight you.
So you guys are arguing?
Yes, and then we wasn't arguing. We was just like play fighting and stuff. And that's when he was making me mad, and that's when I had the knife right here. And then he ended up running to it. But I'm not thinking because he already knew I had it. He was trying to get it from me, but he ended up running to it.
All right. Do you have an ID on you?
No, I don't have
no
no
ID. Do you know your social? Listen,
My last four.
You know your last four? Okay. What? Look, we're trying to figure what's going on.
You know, like what's going to happen. I just need him to wake up.
I don't know. They're working on him. Okay, just relax. They're working on him.
If he alive, then what?
Huh?
Where we go from there?
We gotta take him to the hospital.
Okay, and then what?
And then we just go from there. When he wakes up, we talk to him and everything.
He's like.
We gotta wait. You're 17 also? Okay, what's your date of birth?
Go, like, I didn't even tell my mama. My mama don't even know nothing.
The night of December 20th, 2024, Jahara Malik called 911 herself. She told the operator that her boyfriend had been stabbed. She gave them the address, the parking garage at his apartment complex in Miami near Northwest 6th Court. She stayed on the line. She stayed at the scene. When officers arrived, she was cooperative. During questioning that followed, she explained what had happened between them. She described the situation as horseplay. The two of them had been fooling around, she said, the way teenagers do. It was an accident. She never meant for any of it to happen. For a brief time, that explanation remained the working version of events. It didn't hold for long. Investigators reviewing surveillance footage from inside the apartment complex began to reconstruct the timeline of that night, where the two of them had been, how they had moved, and in what sequence those movements led to the parking garage on the 3rd floor. The footage would raise questions that Horseplay as a framework could not fully answer. You're watching Morbid True Crime, psychological true crime documentaries examining the behavior, evidence, and investigative process behind real criminal cases.
Ooh. I said, ooh. I said, ooh.
Hey, gigging over there. Ooh. He gigging.
The night that everything happened, not one thought in my mind was to leave or run. I didn't want this to happen. I was thinking about saving someone else's life instead of myself. That's why it was a quick reaction for me to wrap his shirt around my hand, apply pressure to his wound, and stop the bleeding while communicating with 911 to assist me. I wanted him to live. I understand that trying to help does not undo the harm. I stayed because at the end of the day, I was at fault. I would rather live knowing I tried to help than live knowing I left him there when I could have possibly saved his life. I was reckless. That knife should have never been out, and because of that, a life was lost. I was wrong for what I did, and every day, I sit and think about the damage I caused. The family wants me in prison, but I'm in my own prison for the rest of my life.
Yakim Lollar was 17 years old. He went by Keimo, the name his family and teammates used, the one that stuck. He played football at Miami Northwestern Senior High School, where he had been a running back. According to those who knew him, he was described as a straight-A student with ambitions that extended well past the football field. His family later said he had dreams of becoming a stockbroker. He was the kind of kid who made people believe he would actually get there. His mother, Nathalie Jean, would later describe the morning of December 20th with a kind of detail that only comes from the need to hold on to something ordinary. She and her daughter were putting up the Christmas tree. "A pink tree," she said. Keimo walked into the room and teased them about it. Then Mariah Carey came on, "We Belong Together," and Keimo started singing at the top of his lungs. His mother and sister became his backup singers. She said she could not have imagined standing in that room, what the end of that day would bring.
We was putting up the Christmas tree, me and Treasure, my youngest. He came in the living room. The first thing he said, because he's always a jokester, "Pink tree, huh, Mom? Pink tree." I said, "Boy, you better ask your sister," which is my oldest, Tamia. She waited the last minute to get that Christmas tree, so we got to get what we getting. And we all was in there doing the tree. And for some reason, it's just like it wasn't coexistent or whatever. It was just a beautiful day. Tamia was she was coming in the door, and he was coming out of his room, and we was playing music. And we was just like, it was just our song, and we was dancing. We was listening to Mariah Carey, "We Belong Together." And then he just coming out the room, and he's just singing. He's like, "When you left, I lost a part of me." And he just singing his heart out. And then we in the background, we his little cheerleaders, we like, "We belong together." And we just singing. And then it was just, that's our normal routine. You know what I'm saying? It was just a beautiful day. Never would we imagine that. We ate, he went in his room. I said, "Oh, hey, Jid, the trash." He told me, "All right, Mom." I said, No, your room." He was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "I'm off tonight, so I'm gonna be here." He said, "Mom, I promise I'm gonna do everything in the morning." That was the last thing my son told me when I went in my room.
Hours later, paramedics found Yakim Lawler on the third floor of a parking garage, bleeding from a wound to his chest. He was transported to Jackson Memorial Hospital's Ryder Trauma Center. He was pronounced dead at 11:53 that night. He was 17 years old. Jahara Malik and Yakim Lawler had been together on and off. Court testimony and family accounts would later describe it as an on-again, off-again relationship. The kind that is difficult to characterize cleanly because its definitions seem to shift depending on the moment you are looking at. What was documented is this. 8 days before December 20th, Yakheim had told Jahara he no longer wanted to be in a relationship with her. His mother, Nathalie Jean, would later describe this directly at the sentencing hearing, telling the court that her son had been honest with Jahara about wanting to end things, and that Jahara's response to that honesty became, in Jean's telling, the context for everything that followed.
She took my son's life for no reason. She took my son's life because he was honest with her, that he didn't want to be with her, and she not realizing her actions, her behavior, and her entitlement is the reason why he didn't want to be with her.
That account represents the family's understanding of events, and it is worth holding as exactly that. What the record establishes is that on the night of December 20th, there was an argument, that Jahara Malik was present, and that Yakim Lollar did not survive it. According to the arrest affidavit, Jahara Malik had plans that day that had nothing to do with Yakim. She was going shopping. She had arranged to meet a friend, and the two of them planned to take an Uber to Dataland Mall. Before she left, she looked for the pepper spray she normally carried for protection. She could not find it. She took a knife instead. That detail was included in her own account to investigators. She described carrying the knife as a precautionary measure, a substitute for the protection she usually had with her. The affidavit documents the account without elaboration. After the shopping trip, she went to meet Yakim at his apartment complex. Surveillance footage from the building captured what happened next. Earlier in the evening, Malik was seen outside the apartment complex, smiling. The footage showed her and Lawler together in the stairwell, running around, playful. At one point, the footage showed her glancing toward the security camera. She appeared to be smiling. The two of them moved into the parking garage on the third floor. The cameras lost direct line of sight to them there. What the footage captured after that was Lawler emerging from behind a wall, running, clutching his chest, bleeding. Moments later, Malik appeared from the same direction, rounding the corner. The audio captured something else. According to City of Miami Police Sergeant Juan Santos, who investigated the case and later testified at the sentencing hearing, the audio from the parking garage recorded Lawler's voice. He could be heard saying, "Jahara, don't." Malik was seen on surveillance video dropping the knife near the scene. She then called 911. The horse-playing explanation was not constructed after the fact in an attorney's office. Jahara Malik offered it that night, during her initial statement to police. She described the two of them playing around. She said the stabbing was accidental.
That's why he didn't wake up so he could tell y'all.
Yeah, well, what are you
Because
going so much?
he didn't. This is okay. He be having nights. We both having nights. Like when he come to my house, we just do that every time we get in arguments.
So what? So y'all, okay.
Wait, so you guys get in arguments and you pull out knives?
You on? I'm on. I'm on, yeah. I mean, I already talked to her, so yeah.
Yeah, I had the knife, but I
Were you guys arguing before that?
no, we was just over here fighting, and then
So fight you
So
are.
you guys are arguing?
yes, and then well, we wasn't arguing. We was just like play fighting and stuff. And that's when he was making me mad, and that's when I had the knife right here, and then he ended up running to it. But I'm not thinking because he already knew I had it. He was trying to get it from me, but he ended up running to it.
All right.
She emphasized through her attorney at subsequent hearings that she had stayed at the scene and attempted to help him. Her attorney, Larry Hanfield, would later say she had turned herself in, tried to render first aid, and cooperated fully with investigators. Those facts are not in dispute. She did stay, she did call for help, but investigators began examining the wound itself. Prosecutor Kristen Rodriguez laid out what the physical evidence showed during the sentencing proceeding. The knife, a 4-inch blade, had penetrated Lawler's hoodie, penetrated the shirt beneath it, passed through muscle, clipped a rib, and reached his heart. Rodriguez's argument was direct. That level of penetration, requiring that level of force, did not align with the accidental contact described in the Horseplay account.
So did she demonstrate for you how she said she was holding the knife?
She did.
And how was she? Can you show for the court?
Basically, she ended up with a knife like this.
Okay, so that's what she tells you she ends up. And does she tell you how high she ended up holding up the knife?
Just like this.
Like this. Okay, so I'm gonna ask if you could just do me a favor. Could you please stand up? It's okay with the judge. So she demonstrated for you how she was holding the knife. How high up was she holding it?
She did just like this.
Right here. Okay. I'm gonna take this from you and ask that you stay there because we're gonna reenact it a bit. Where exactly is the stab wound of the victim? Excuse me.
Right here.
It's up higher in his chest. Okay, and so
Towards the left.
the victim is how tall? Do you recall?
5'10".
5'10". Okay, and the defendant was how tall?
5'6", 5'7".
Okay, so they're about 3 inches apart. How tall are you?
6'2".
Okay, I'm 5'6". I'm probably wearing 2 inches of heels, so that makes us maybe proportionate to them. So she says she's, correct me if I'm doing this right, she's holding it just like this. And does she tell you she's doing this? Or does she tell you she has it here? Okay, and then what does she tell you happens to the victim while she's holding the knife?
There was something with the door. The victim opened the door and just bumped into it.
And he bumps into her. Okay, so presuming that that's the case, does she say that the knife is here? And he bumps into her right here? Okay, is that consistent with the fact that the stab wound is actually up here? Okay, so it would have had to have been up here.
Judge Christine Hernandez, in handing down the sentence, addressed this directly. She said, "The amount of force that was required to inflict that wound was not accidental." She also noted something else, that she did not believe this had been done in an unsophisticated manner. That word, unsophisticated, is a legal term, but it carries weight outside the courtroom too. What the judge appeared to be saying was that this was not a random, chaotic moment, that something more deliberate had shaped what happened in that garage. At the bond hearing following her arrest, prosecutors went beyond the night in question. They presented evidence that Malik had been known to carry a knife. They introduced text messages that had been identified during the investigation, messages that, according to prosecutors, referenced harming others. The judge at that hearing upgraded the conditions of her release, placing her under total lockdown house arrest, restricted to her home except for school and meetings with her attorneys. Prosecutors also introduced surveillance footage from a violent altercation at Malik's high school that had resulted in a 10-day suspension. The defense pushed back on each of these points. Her attorneys argued that prior incidents did not define the night of December 20th, that Malik had no prior arrests, and that her mental health history, diagnoses of PTSD, depression, and anxiety, provided necessary context for understanding her behavior. These competing narratives, prior pattern versus isolated incident, would define the proceeding at every stage. What investigators ultimately concluded was this: the wound was a homicide. The medical examiner's determination came a few weeks after the stabbing. Malik was arrested on January 28, 2025, more than a month after the night Lawler died. That delay became its own chapter in the case. Yakim Lawler's family knew almost immediately who was responsible. The surveillance footage had captured it. The 911 call had been made by Malik herself. The knife had been dropped at the scene, and yet Malik was not arrested until January 28th, 39 days after Yakim died. His father, Darvid Lollar, described the period between the stabbing and the arrest in terms that were difficult to hear. He said investigators had been unable to find a sufficient basis to charge her that first night, despite what felt, from the family's perspective, like clarity. They couldn't find something to charge her with the night of, he said, when there was no question as to what happened or who done this.
Couldn't find something to charge her with the night of, when there was no question as to what happened or who done it. So, I mean, it's just right now, it's a little bittersweet.
He called the eventual arrest bittersweet. In the weeks between December 20th and January 28th, the family did not wait quietly. They organized demonstrations outside the Miami-Dade State Attorney's office. They spoke to media. They called for accountability. Yakim's mother said afterward that it was those public actions, that sustained, visible refusal to let the case quietly close, that eventually pushed prosecutors to move. Whether that is accurate or whether the delay was simply the time required to build a legally sufficient case is a distinction the family was not in a position to accept as comfort. What they knew was that their son had died on December 20th, and that, for nearly 6 weeks, the person responsible had been at home. When charges were finally filed, Jahara Malik was charged with manslaughter with a deadly weapon. She was also charged as an adult, despite being 17 at the time of the incident. Lawler's family was not satisfied with the charge. They had wanted something more serious, an acknowledgement, in their words, that what had happened was not an accident, not recklessness, but a deliberate act. Malik's attorneys argued for the opposite, that her age, her mental health history, and the circumstances of the incident warranted treatment as a youthful offender. In March 2026, more than a year after the stabbing, Jahara Malik appeared at the Richard E. Gerstein Justice Building in downtown Miami and entered a guilty plea. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter with a deadly weapon and to carrying a concealed weapon. There was no plea agreement attached. She did not negotiate a specific sentence. She stood before the court and allowed the judge to determine what would follow. That is not a common legal strategy. It is, in practice, a kind of surrender, trusting the outcome entirely to the discretion of one person. Whether it reflected genuine remorse, a calculated legal decision, or both, is something only Malik fully understands. On May 5, 2026, the courtroom at the Richard E. Gerstein Justice Building was full. On one side sat the family of Yakim Lawler, relatives, friends, classmates from Miami Northwestern. Many wore shirts bearing his image. Some had to step outside during the proceedings, when the emotion became too much to remain seated through. On the other side sat Jahara Malik's family. Several of them would leave the courtroom in tears when the sentence was read. The hearing lasted more than 5 hours. Lawler's family spoke first, in victim impact statements that carried years of accumulated grief. His friend read a letter that included the line, "Someone who should be here isn't because of your actions. Our friend should be here. He should be living, growing older, graduating, going to prom." His aunt, Zeldrina Beecham, looked directly at Malik. The words she said have been reported across multiple outlets. They were raw, and they came from a place that was not interested in restraint. His mother, Nathalie Jean, told the court, "She gave my son a death sentence." His father, Darvid Lollar, had previously said the killing didn't have to happen. He had said it multiple times, in different rooms, in front of different audiences. Some version of that sentence seemed to be the thing he kept returning to. When Jahara Malik addressed the court, she spoke briefly. She said, "I was wrong for what I did, and every day I sit and think about the damage I caused. I wish I could go back and change what happened, but I can't. And that's the worst part." Judge Christine Hernandez spent considerable time explaining her reasoning. She said she believed Malik was remorseful. She also said she did not believe the stabbing was an isolated incident of aggression. She referenced the evidence that had been presented regarding Malik's behavior toward Lawler and toward others. She said she did not believe what had happened in that garage was done in an unsophisticated manner. She said, "Although I do believe that you are remorseful, I do not believe that this was an isolated incident of aggression towards the victim based on the evidence that was presented here in court. And I also do not believe that this was done in an unsophisticated manner." The sentence: 17 years in Florida State Prison, followed by 5 years of reporting probation, mandatory mental health evaluation, and one additional condition. Every year on December 20th, for the duration of her probation, Jahara Malik is required to write a letter acknowledging what happened and reflecting on how it has affected her life. The prosecutor had asked for 20 years. The family had asked for 30. The maximum possible was 30.
Ms. Malik, the court will sentence you to 17 years in Florida State Prison, followed by 5 years of reporting probation. Special condition of that probation, you will have to go a mental health evaluation and abide by any treatment if necessary. You will have to write a letter December 20th of every year that you are on probation, acknowledging what had occurred and how it has affected your life. And I do not take this sentence lightly, Ms. Malik. This is not something that this court wanted to do, but I have to impose a sentence that I believe holds you accountable, recognizes the severity of the offense, and is something that's appropriate in light of everything that I've heard.
Malik's uncle, standing outside the courtroom, said he believed justice had not been served, that the court had failed to fully account for her age and circumstances. Lawler's mother, standing in the same building, said, "My son can finally rest in peace, knowing that justice was served." Both of those statements can be simultaneously true. That is the nature of outcomes like this one. They satisfy no one completely, and they carry everyone differently. The Lawler family kept showing up. That is the phrase that keeps appearing across the documentation of this case. They showed up to the state attorney's office with signs. They showed up to bond hearings. They showed up to every proceeding. They showed up on May 5th in shirts bearing Keimo's face. His mother said she intended to keep showing up. She has said she does not entirely feel that justice has been served, not in the full measure of what was taken. But she has also said she wanted her son to rest. Yakim Lollar was 17 years old. He was a football player. He was a student who wanted to become a stockbroker. He sang Mariah Carey in the living room the morning he died, with his mother and sister as his backup singers, standing next to a pink Christmas tree. Jahara Malik was also 17. She is now 18. She will be in her mid-30s when she is released if she completes her sentence. Every December 20th, she is required to sit with what happened and put it into words. What the investigation ultimately documented was not a single impulsive moment spiraling from nowhere. It documented a relationship under strain, an argument that became physical, a knife that was already there, and a wound that the evidence suggested required deliberate force to inflict. What it could not fully document, and what no investigation can, is the precise interior of a moment like that one. What each person was feeling, what Yakheim was thinking when he said, "Jahara, don't." What Jahara was thinking in the seconds before the blade made contact. Those things do not appear in affidavits. What remains is a 17-year-old who died in a parking garage 4 days before Christmas, a mother who chose a casket, a father who keeps saying the words "it didn't have to happen," and a sentence that satisfied no one completely and everyone partially. That is where this case sits. Not resolved, just concluded. Thank you for watching Morbid True Crime, psychological true crime documentaries focused on the behavior, evidence, and investigative process behind real criminal cases. If this documentary stayed with you, subscribe for more investigations built on research, restraint, and respect for the people at the center of every case. New documentaries are released weekly.